Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the lunch as much as I did. It was really a lovely lunch. Thank you, Wayne, for that. We appreciate it. So in session 3, the first one is about Numino, a counter-cyclical twist to improve mathematical proficiency. It's lovely to have you here, Tias, and over to you.
Thanks, Maritinka. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for this lovely slot after lunch. I do accept the challenge. The Numino, a counter-cyclical twist to develop mathematical proficiency. The first question, what is a counter-cyclical twist? If you look at that circle, you'll stay in the blue line forever, you'll be stuck. Getting out means breaking the circle or making a fundamental change. If you look at the Mobius loop, it took a circle, it cut it, it twisted 180 degrees and it attached it together. It gives you a Mobius loop, and that allows you to try a complete different pattern. Instead of being stuck inside in the rotation, you get out on the outside. Now, this required twist is a fundamental change to create a new path. So what does it mean in this sentence? In this case, it is a plan to disrupt the status quo in a unique and positive way. Now, firstly, the question was how to link it to the people. Now, this is called mathematics or mathematical proficiency. How to link it to the people? Righto. First, do the mental maths. Eikonu grocer has got a bread sale. 2 loaves of bread available for 13 rand each. You take 2 loaves and pay with 100 rand note. The cashier put the following change on the counter and starts to serve the next customer. 150 rand note and 4 silver coins. The question is, must you take the change, yes or no? Who say yes? Who say no? Right, a few saying no, we'll look at the answer at the end. Now, the problem. Very poor mathematics results in schools and from school leavers for the last 30 years and more. Just comprehend that fact, and that's very, very important. There's lots of research that prove it. Mathematics educators across all grades, phases, and in most schools are not fully equipped to teach mathematics at the proficiency levels required by the curriculum. Now, mathematics and mathematical proficiency has got 5 strands and is described by Kirkpatrick as what someone needs to have and be able to do in order to do maths well. Now, if we look at that mathematical proficiency, there's 5 strides. Now, if we look at the game Numino, conceptual understanding is the theory. Do you understand maths? The game can't improve that. Procedural fluency is do math smoothly, know your tables. The game can do it. Strategic competent is solve problems. We've structured it so that it can address that. Adaptive reasoning, think and apply in different topics. We've structured it that they can do it. And productive dispositioning, believe you can do maths. By the results and the improvements that are reasonably easy to achieve, they can start to believe that they can do maths. What did we do in our research? We played Numino. It's an interactive and engaging compendium of games played with dominoes that enables anyone struggling with numbers to develop mathematical proficiency to their required level enjoyably. 2 very important comments. It's facilitator introduced and player driven. Mean you teach the learners or the players the game, and then player driven, they accept responsibility for management of the game, the results, etc. Secondly, it's played in groups with rotating roles and responsibilities as a captain, a player, and a referee. Who played? We had 2 SEF projects, social employment fund projects, where in both of them unemployed people ages between 20 and 45 applied and were appointed after interviews. They act as facilitators for the games. In the first SEF project, we only used voluntary learner groups with no controls or assessments. In the second one, we created a structured voluntary catch-up club for learners in grades 5, 6, 7, and 9. We did a pre- and a post-assessment for the facilitators in both projects, their numino scores and their numeracy grades. And then for the learners in the second project, we did the numino scores, the numeracy grades, and the maths marks, and we compare. Now, let's play. On your chair was an A5 with 2 tables on it. The left one looks like that. On the top left, you'll see before, and there's a domino with a 1 and a 2. Now, the first game is Dota. Now, the answer for Dota is 2 dots on the one side and 1 dot on the other side. And we read it from left to right so that we adhere to the conventions of maths and language. If I play Ada, I add the 2 and the 1 and I get 3. If I play Mina, I subtract the 1 from the 2 and I get 1. If I play Malta, I multiply the 2 and the 1 and I get 2. And if I play Diva, I divide the 2 by 1 and I get 2. Now, you don't need to complete, you can complete later. But if you now complete that and I calculate your results, I've actually done a pre-assessment. So now we go back into the clubs and now we play dominoes. And that's what they do, the different games in the groups. And then we do the same after assessment after 3 months, and I can see what's the improvement and how they have done. Key results, facilitators in the 2 projects show the same tendency. These people have all had matric, but their numeracy assessment assessed between grade 2 and 3 grade levels. After 6 months playing the game, they improved to an average around about 6 grade levels. So there's improvement of around about 3 grade levels on a standardized numeracy assessment that we were very happy about. The learners only in the CEF 2 project, we're busy with the data processing after we have received the July exam marks. We assessed their numino scores, their numeracy grades, their maths marks, also their enjoyment, their life optimism, and their attitude. These results will be available around 14 September. Take-home messages. First, it's fun. The kids enjoy it. The unemployed youth enjoy it. Learning happens. We've got more than enough proof that it happens. And then dominoes is king. Dominoes, we've been using that for 5 years now. You don't need to replace one. Sometimes it gets lost. There's no wear and tear. There's no marking. There's no paper. It's just fun. Secondly, the third CEF, where we will have an improved version of the catch-up clubs and better training for our facilitators. We hope to start in September 2025, 300 facilitators, 20 schools, and 1,200 learners. The next thing, and that will be the breakthrough, if we can achieve that. We're planning a Numino app, and we've got proof of concept, but we want to capture more and better data, link it to artificial intelligence and big data tendencies to support the game results with analysis, recommendation, and video channels in South Africa's official languages explaining maths concepts with dominoes. But the app will be used to capture data, and dominoes will play the main tool of improving because of the big debate between what apps do for children and the social interaction, all those kind of things that they can learn by playing together. The important thing is, if we can achieve that, we can now address conceptual understanding. Because if you can address conceptual understanding, what we can't do in the beginning, because that's the theory, you can't really improve a lot. We assume you've got some kind of a conceptual understanding because you have been in a school or you are still in a school and you know a little bit of maths. But if you look at all the problem in the beginning, it's not a very good assumption. Then if we can address the conceptual understanding, we have now done this counter-cyclical twist. We've created the opportunity for everyone to improve, catch up, or excel in maths, depending on themselves. No teachers involved, no parents. I can take my app, I can download it, I can play the game, I can look at the videos with the AI that say, if you can do 1 times 6 and you can't do 6 times 1, you've got a problem with this and not with that. Oh, about the bread? No, you must not take the change. Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Theas. That was fun.
Sorry.
So we're going to go now to Ngoni, who's going to talk to us about bridging the research and societal impact, a case study of knowledge valorization. We are looking forward to that. Thank you. Are you doing it?
My name is not Ngoni, but Ngoni's just given a message to say that he's had to rush to Joburg for an emergency meeting. So having seen the slides 5 minutes ago, I'm going to give Ngoni's presentation. And nobody's allowed to ask any questions during the panel session. Okay. So this is a presentation from the Agincourt Health and Population Unit, or the Rural Public Health and Health Transitions Research Unit of Wits, which operates a study site for health and population research. Why is this not advancing? Okay. So the study site is in Bushbuck Ridge. It's a site of 31 villages, 20,000 households and 120,000 people in a former homeland area, formerly Gazankulu. And the unit has been undertaking long-term health and population research in that entire population of the study site. They have a health and demographic surveillance research platform which captures every new birth, every death, cause of death, in-migration, out-migration in the entire population in that study site. And they've been running that census platform since 1992. So it's a really rich data set of longitudinal health and population research, with other research that piggybacks on it around socioeconomic variables, not a sample, but the entire population. They also then link with clinic records in the local clinics, so there's real-time connection between the health population surveillance system and the clinic data, so that enables follow-up visits and digitizing clinic records to enrich the data set around health trends and health-seeking behavior and health outcomes. So the value of longitudinal data is it helps one understand trends in key parameters such as births, deaths, etc. So if you look at the mortality trends amongst men and women, you'll see it peaked during the 2000s. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to what that key driver of mortality was then? Yeah, this was in the peak of the HIV and AIDS pandemic. But you can see the mortality rates have come right down. And if you look at fertility rates, so birth rates, have also started coming down. And so the population pyramid, if you remember high school geography, this was the typical population pyramid in 1993, typical of a developing world population. Started tucking in to become bell-shaped, but now we're getting some new higher increased children born in more recent years. So some interesting dynamics going on there, but certainly a population transition underway. And longitudinal data helps us understand these trends. Some really important societal impacts of this research. So there was research on high blood pressure and heart disease, and they found that high blood pressure was a result of high sodium, high salt intake in these populations. And the research output of this was used to motivate for limiting salt in bread. And the legislated limit of salt in the bread that we buy now was based on the data from this study and another complementary study in an urban area. And this unit has now also been tracking the evaluation of the salt regulation on blood pressure and on our health. And this research platform enables this kind of testing of interventions. There's also an interesting project that's collaborating with traditional healers, with Kukula organization. The question is, what role for traditional healers in the care of people who do not visit healthcare facilities? And so there's an interesting collaboration between public health and the formal health sector and traditional health systems. There's also interesting research on cognitive aging and dementia, so looking at what the risk factors are to dementia in rural populations, which is a totally under-researched dimension of rural health. Then community engagement is really important. Obviously, not only for community entry and the conducting of the research in the communities, but also in the feedback of research findings. A really important part of that building of trust. And we heard earlier on today about how important trust is for collaborative governance. This trust is also important for these relationships between researchers and the communities in which they work. And there's an annual community feedback process where every village has a community meeting where the research unit community staff give the findings from the most recent census conducted in the study site, as well as the results from any research projects that have been completed within the previous year. And there's also engagement with traditional authorities. I think possibly better engagement with municipalities are needed, and I think that's something we're going to be building on in the future. Obviously, human well-being is the focus of the research, but of course you also want to be, there's a moral imperative to also be having a positive benefit in other ways as far as possible. As an academic institution, we have a mandate for knowledge generation, so it's easy for researchers to sometimes step back and say, well, development is not our game, so we don't have an obligation there. But this research unit has used its networks and its community engagement structures to initiate an activity that could provide benefit from the local communities by working with the CETA program to get funding for supporting local entrepreneur development, supporting local entrepreneurs developing their business plans and enabling them to thrive as micro businesses. One could say, well, this is not the business of a research institution, but they recognize that they have the audience, the platform, and the influence to be able to initiate an activity that creates benefit for the local communities, over and above the research that goes back to sort of policymakers. And so in 2023, they had the first intake of young entrepreneurs who were supported by this training program. They trained through Wits University Entrepreneurial Unit, funded by the Bank CETA. And it's just a nice example of finding innovative ways of creating benefit for local communities who have been so accommodating over the years of this research unit. And it's a wonderful example of finding ways to extend beyond just the policy implications and benefits of research. And so there's the graduates in 2024. And all of those obviously go on to start or continue with their own businesses, benefiting their families and their communities. And it's something that the unit is very proud of. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Wayne. Can you and Tias quickly join us for questions? Thank you. Let's see, do you have any questions for these two gentlemen? Tony, here, Dumisa.
Sorry, Wayne, this is for you. And it's actually more linked to the previous session, so it could be for anyone from earlier. But I was just thinking now, health in these areas and plastic waste. And there's been a lot of research, I think, in Asia and maybe Europe about toxins leaching out of plastics and getting into people and potentially causing cancer and hormonal problems in children and stuff. So I was just wondering, is there actually any research going on with that potential impact in these areas?
So not as far as I know, Tony, but it's certainly something that would be interesting to look at, and I can certainly pass that on to my colleagues in the unit. Certainly something that would be overlooked in rural areas, but potentially becoming an increasingly important health issue in rural populations.
There you go. Were you going to ask the question too? I hope you did the sums, did you? The maths.
arithmetic, not maths. Okay, I'm joking. About the health, I've got a problem with this demographic scale research, which my honor done, about the birth rate between male and female. It seems on the scale there, the margin is too little. While we know that the female are more than male, but on the scale there, there's a small margin between male and female. How did you get that small scale, that small margin difference?
So that's based on the annual census that they do. So that's the actual real-time data. They record every birth, every new birth in the study site, and then they update the roster for every household, and they have the age and the gender of every resident in the population. So that's the actual data for that particular population. They've got the gender of every individual living in those 31 villages.
Yeah, I'm interested in the myths. I thought we needed some background where this is happening, where the targeted group for the training, small children, bigger ones, but I have to confess I was a math student in my previous life. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, sir. For this coming project, there will be 10 schools in the Eikenhoek area and 10 schools in the Sekororo area that will participate. At each school, there will be 3 clubs of 20 kids each, and they will have 5 facilitators working with them. For the last 2 years, we have been working in the same areas. So the groups that we target, because the project runs over the end of the year. So we will, at the June next year, we will have grade 5, 6 and 7s, and then grade 9s that we're playing the game with.
Thank you. Just a kind of a comment, Robert, about Tony's question about the child health and waste. We at the University of the Western Cape with University of Stellenbosch is busy wrapping up research on the impact of child health in illegal dumping sites from the community. And we do find it quite significant, at this stage only a correlation, but quite strong correlation to things like high prevalence of stunting amongst children who grow up next to illegal dump sites, issues with respiratory diseases, diarrhea, and the last one, and even weight issues as well. So there's quite strong evidence for negative health impacts.
Thank you, Anthony. Anybody else? Shall we wrap the session and go for tea? Another 2, 3.
No.
Not tea now.
Not yet.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Sorry, apologies for causing confusion. I tend to do that.
I think you just got everyone excited.
Now we're getting to people and biodiversity, which is quite a highlight. And my colleague from the KTC, Simon, can you join us to come and talk to us about Tonkroftia, which is a very exciting thing that has been discovered and excited the team.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about a species of plant that I've been quite involved with over the last year or two. In April last year, I was participating in outings with the plant specialist group of Limpopo and Mpumalanga. and Kevin Balkwell scheduled an outing to the Steenveld. So the thorncroftias are a group of plants that look like plectranthus with these beautiful purple flowers. And they're very range restricted. They need ecosystems that are protected from fire, and you find them in rocky outcrops from Pongola up north to the Soutpansberg. And at the point of starting this research, there are only 6 described species of thorncroftias in the world. So it's a very range-restricted genus, and there's not that many species in the genus. So in April last year, with Professor Kevin Balkwell from Wits University, the plant specialist group, along with myself and a few other members, headed off to the Steenveld, which is in the northern section of the Bladder River Canyon. It's very dry and rocky, and then right at the lip of the escarpment, it gets moist and very rocky and protected from fires right on the lip of the cliffs. And Kevin had found a plant grown in a garden at the bottom of the mountain and spoken to the people and gone up to see the plant in the 80s and remembered it there and thought it was a little bit odd, a little bit different to the species that it was supposed to be, which is Thorncroftia succulenta, with the type locality being in the Soutpansberg. So he decided it was worthy of investigation. So we went out to the Steenveld. I actually managed to find the plants growing there, and we were able to see that the flowers are in fact much longer than those of succulenta, and there's also differences in the morphology and the hairs on the leaves. And then there was this, the first collection of this plant was from 1953 and 1954 on a rocky slope near Maripskop, and it was collected by botanist Leslie Codd. And initially, with starting investigation into this plant, now that we realized that it could be something different, we went to Codd's specimen and thought, okay, in Maripskop, it's quite a small area, we'll be able to find this thing easily. And we went on several outings to Maripskop and didn't find it anywhere. So Kevin went back to the National Herbarium in Pretoria and requested detailed scans of the herbarium specimen and photographs that Codd had taken of the plant. And eventually we managed to find a photograph with a little bit of the landscape in the background. And from previous trips to the area, I was able to figure out that that rocky slope there with the aspect of the cliffs and the skyline could only be in one place, which is on the slopes north of the Mulford Plateau or Hebronberg. So now we've moved across from being on the north side of the canyon to being on the south side of the Bladder River Canyon. With this knowledge in mind, we headed out to try and find it. This is a picture of the Steenveld. You can see it likes that mist belt. The plants, although being rock-growing species and being semi-succulent, really need the mist to survive. Here's another picture of the flowers. So I went and found the exact spot where I could estimate the photo to have been taken from, which is on this bowl on top of the mountain, and it's really rocky. And in 1954, when Codd went to go collect the plant there, or when he initially found it, it was natural intact grassland. Within a decade, the entire bowl on that side of the mountain had been planted up with pine plantations. So, and the plantations had remained in place under several rotations until about 1994, when the decision was made to deaccession the low-veld plantations, and talks were underway to hand over that section of the mountain to the Bladder River Canyon Nature Reserve. Kruger Canyon since got involved with clearing teams around 2016, 2015, and worked that whole bowl because it was at that point it was an abandoned pine plantation a lot of encroachment of invasive species, and we didn't think there was really much hope of finding this plant on those slopes. But K2C, Kruger Canyons did a really good job of managing to get rid of the pines. There were a number of hot fires, terrible landslides on that slope. So we didn't know if we were going to be able to find the plant there. But in September last year, the plant specialist group made a dedicated outing to go to that bowl and try and search for the plant. And luckily we were able to find it there, although at the time it wasn't in flower. And then recently in April this year, during the autumn flowering season for the plant, I went back with Nectaron and some of the other team from Kruger Canyons, and we were able to photograph it flowering in that area. So it managed to survive on a few boulders that had been surrounded by pine trees, but where it had still managed to get enough light resources to not be completely competed out by the pines. If the ecosystem hadn't been restored, and if these teams consisting of community members from the bottom of the mountain hadn't been able to get in there, it's quite likely that this plant would have gone locally extinct in its very small range. It's only known from the Tree River to the Steenveld. And then this year, Kevin has now published a revision of Thorncroftia, which now includes 8 species, including Thorncroftia cordii, which is the species that's endemic to the Blade River Canyon. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. From Thorncroftia, we're going to the Cape Parrots. Welcome, Daryl.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I can keep this relatively quick. My name is Daryl van der Merwe, and I work for the Wild Bird Trust Cape Parrot Project. So, basically we have a problem. We've got forests spread throughout our sort of eastern half of the country, and we don't really know where to aim our priorities in terms of where to utilize our resources for the future. So what we needed to do was come up with a kind of prioritization process to direct our resources. So that's what I'm going to be chatting about today. I didn't personally undertake this framework, this prioritization framework, but it was done by our landscape manager in collaboration with the UKZN. But on a much smaller scale, we are busy doing that now for our northern population. Okay. But as I said, we're very lucky in South Africa to even have a forest biome, because according to our legislation, it needs to be 1% of our land surface. So forests are really small. They only cover 0.6% of our country's surface, and they're extremely spread out and very often quite difficult to get to places. And they naturally have quite a disproportionate amount of biodiversity. So they've got a very high biodiversity for quite a small area, and there's actually a diversity of forests within the country too. So generally, yes, these are protected environments. 46% of our forests overall are protected within some kind of formal reserve. Just also linking it to strategic water source areas, about 43% of our forests fit within these areas. And there's a number of legislation which supports the protection of these forests. They're listed on the left there. But it's very important also to align our legislation and to support, and we need to align our prioritization to the legislation, because that helps us support implementation. Then we've got this caveat. So in most senses, people don't often use a single species to protect a landscape. But what we wanted to try do was see if the Cape parrot would be a good umbrella species for forest protection within South Africa. We thought it might be good because firstly it's an umbrella, They need these old growth forests to breed, so they're a forest specialist. They're a charismatic, beautiful species to see, so they can attract funding. There's already an established community of people who are working towards an action plan to improve the protection of the forests. And 70% of their habitat falls within strategic water resource areas, so they're also very important from that sense. We wanted to use this Cape parrot with a species, with a prioritization framework to see where would we best utilize our resources for the future. So that's pretty much the aim. This is a kind of workflow, so develop this framework, source the data required, develop the maps, score all these forests, and then rank them thereafter. So this is probably the most complicated piece of the project. So this is where we score forests as within their quality and threat. So we have two parts of the matrix. You've got your quality and your threat. What makes the quality determines on the size, the presence of Cape parrots, habitat suitability, which was done according to a species distribution model that UKZN undertook. Connectivity, how central is it within a node? Our forests are very separated, so how important is one stop compared to another? And then also the extent of transformation within this buffer adjacent to the forest. And then we also have the threat, the protected area, so PA stands for protected area status, the accessibility, how easy is it to get into these forests, and then population densities adjacent to them, and sometimes the resources that these people use from the forest all went into this framework. So then pretty much number 2, you get all your layers, sort them out. We ID'd some candidate forests. We kind of figured that bigger was better, so more than 226 hectares, and also within the species distribution model that they were 0.5 and above habitat suitability. Then you just put all of the stuff into a computer and it does all some fancy odds and ends, and you basically come out with a score for each forest based on the quality and threats that we discussed earlier. And what we were interested in is pretty much this. So on the top left you can see the red block refers to high quality, high threat. Green is high quality, low threat. And then your grays are low quality areas, either high threat or low threat. And that's pretty much what we wanted. Because here, for instance, in the red areas, we know that it's high quality, high threat. That means that it's probably not protected, and there's probably a lot of resource use. So in areas like this, we know we need to bring an approach of sustainable forestry management, as well as potentially restoration or reforestation. So then we know those are the areas we can aim our community projects to develop, say, community nurseries to improve forest health. While the green areas, they're high quality, low threat, likely already under some form of protection. So in those cases, it's important either to protect or to monitor. So that basically gave us the important piece. So there's just some summary of our results. So one of the more interesting things, I think, so of these 99 forests, 33% were high quality, high threat, while 20% were high quality, low threat. But most interestingly, this graph you've got per province, and you can see that 12% of the habitat or the priority forests were actually in Mpumalanga. And we've almost got no parrots here, or very, very few records. So what is happening here that's restricting our parrots from being in this location when they are just down the road in Zanin? Very, very, very interesting situation that's happening there. But anyway, so these are just some summaries. I'm not going to go into the results very specifically, but generally we've got coverage throughout all 8 subtypes. We did bring it down also to a catchment level, so 73% of our priority forests are in strategic water resource areas. And basically the important thing is, for the long term, now we know where to aim our initiatives. So for long-term habitat monitoring, we've approached DFFE, so some of these priority forests we now want to continue monitoring. For river monitoring, we're approaching the Department of Water and Sanitation. Partnerships for expansion, we know in these high-quality, low-threat areas where, they've got good quality forests but currently not looked at. We can develop those there. And then in these high-quality, high-threat areas, this is where we want to develop community partnerships to restore forests at a later stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daryl. And let's go for the last session now, and the predators. So we moved from thorn croftia to the parrots, now to the leopards, or the predators. Welcome. Sorry, yeah. That's Gareth.
I give you,
Let's cross. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for sticking it out until this late in the day. I'm going to be presenting my PhD proposal. I've just finished the proposal process, and I'm looking at a divided landscape around the Hoedspruit area and the use of a multi-use landscape by free-roaming carnivores. Studying through the University of Mpumalanga under the supervision of Professor Dan Parker, and the project is funded by PaintedDog TV. Until recently, landscapes have been pretty well connected, and due to the expansion of the human population, the need for urbanization, as well as land for agriculture, we've had extensive changes in habitat and resulted in habitat loss and fragmentation. And this compromises functional connectivity of landscapes, and a big topic at the moment is connectivity and corridor networks. And multi-use landscapes have conservation consequences for these ideas. And you can see in this photograph a very modified landscape at an orchard bordering a protected area in the Hoedspruit region. And the focus of my project is looking at how free-roaming carnivores are using this landscape and how they're moving through this landscape. And the reason why we're looking at large carnivores is because they're often the first species to be affected by habitat loss, as well as the fragmentation of landscapes due to their spatial requirements. They need large spaces to function effectively, and that puts them into conflict with people and results in persecution and their loss from the landscape. They're also umbrella species. They draw attention, they bring in funding, and they can give us a good idea as to the health of ecosystems. And then a lot of science has shown that it's important to understand the distribution of carnivores, as well as how population dynamics fluctuate in space and time, and how carnivores are moving through these altered landscapes. And as the threat of habitat loss and fragmentation increases, how are they adapting to this? And you can see a leopard in a sugar bean field there as a good example. We know that leopards particularly are moving through these altered landscapes. So Kruger Canyons, we pretty much know the basic information on it, but one of the key projects, and one that the general public know the most about, is this idea of joining the Kruger National Park to the Blyde River Nature Reserve in this corridor. And this area around Hoedspruit has seen a large change in land use into agriculture, particularly of citrus and mango farming. And in the turn of the century, there was about an 86% increase in agriculture, and that's obviously continued up until today. And the Kruger Canyons as a whole is a pretty understudied area, especially outside of protected areas, in terms of baseline density estimates and how animals, especially predators, are moving through this altered landscape.
Just if I go back there, you can't quite see it here, but there's 2 proposed corridors that are viable, going north of Hoedspruit in the blue and then south of Hoedspruit also in the blue, to link the Greater Kruger to the Blyde River Nature Reserve. The one south of Hoedspruit, there's less land that needs to be protected or converted into protected areas. So the aim of my PhD is to investigate how free-roaming carnivores, being leopards, spotted hyena, and brown hyena, are moving through this gradient of landscape between natural habitats, the open system of the Kruger National Park, and then the smaller fenced game reserve south of Hoedspruit and into the Blyde River Nature Reserve, and through this multi-use landscape of agriculture and wildlife estates and game farming in this proposed corridor area. And the questions that we're asking are, what are the baseline density estimates of carnivores outside of protected areas and in the different land use types, as well as the prey species densities there, just because to understand what's available in the different land use types. How do different land use types and infrastructure influence the movement patterns and the spatial and temporal patterns of carnivores through this landscape? And to what extent do alternative land use types, wildlife estates, agriculture, game farms, play in connectivity, linking 2 protected areas together, even if they're not formally protected? So a couple of methods looking at leopards, spotted hyenas, and brown hyenas, because they are relatively unaffected by fencing, and they are moving through this landscape already, unlike cheetahs and lions that don't really move through a landscape because of fencing, and then wild dogs are really well understood in this area as a whole. To do this using camera traps in a grid formation like that one represented there, where we have access to different land use types, have a camera trap in those areas. This grid is 2 by 2 kilometers square, 2 by 2 kilometers, 4 kilometers square grids, and that's based on a female leopard territory. And then that's going to give us population density estimates as well as occupancies in these areas. And we're going to look at potentially collaring individuals to get fine-scale data into understanding how carnivores are spending their time in this landscape and how they're moving at a fine-scale data frequency. And how much time is a predator spending on a wildlife estate versus a neighboring protected area versus a neighboring citrus farm? Are they resident in citrus, or are they just moving through, or game farms? So the contribution of this work is to firstly determine baseline density estimates of these carnivores outside of protected areas and in the different land use types, and understand their movement patterns. Are they using wildlife estates for refuge from lions in protected areas? Are they using citrus as a stepping stone between natural habitat patches, or are animals becoming accustomed to moving around people in these different landscapes and are resident in these altered landscapes? And obviously the viability of alternative land uses and this idea of a corridor, and in providing baseline data for informing of corridor planning as well as its management. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gareth. Would you join us in the front here? Simon and Daryl, can you join him? And can we then ask the people, do you have questions for these 3 young men? So let's start at the back there and then move to Prof. Wayne in the front.
Hi, this is for Daryl. Thanks for the Cape Parrot talk. I want to ask, with regards to this prominent forest patch locally to us, you haven't elaborated due to time probably, but can you explain to us, this local forest patch, obviously I get a lot of questions with regards to why don't we see Cape Parrots around here, and so is it actually a significant forest patch, this Mariekskop, Blyde River, part of the reserve up here, close to K2C, where most of us come from, and is it high quality, low quality, and your opinion on the current state of affairs?
Yeah, so it did come out as high quality. With regard to why we're not seeing Cape parrots here, we still don't know. We think it's got something to do with the topography between Rasekaroro and this blighter kind of copy here. But I mean, your forests are in really good state. So it is very odd for us. So that's one of our next questions, to kind of see what's going on at a fine scale, maybe. Also to initiate this monitoring, so we can actually get a grip of what's going on the ground. But yeah, could be just a lack of those big mature Afrocarpus yellowwoods, which does impact the breeding, and obviously without breeding you're not getting any recruitment into the population. But it's a difficult one, because like you say, you've got really beautiful forest up here. Yeah, sorry I couldn't give you more.
Thank you. Gareth, brilliant presentation, and really interested to see the outcomes of your PhD. Got a couple of questions. First one, you said in your presentation there was little data. Why is that for the area, given that we're based Greater Kruger area? Why is that not the case, or why is that the case? And secondly, talking about connectivity, what about the barrier effects of roads and the railway line, and how are you taking that into consideration?
Thanks, Wendy. I was quite surprised at the lack of population density estimates for the area when I was doing literature review for this project, and I typed it in several times into different search engines in different ways and using scientific names and common names, and I was very surprised at the lack of data, especially outside of the protected areas. And for Kruger to canyons and the biosphere, in terms of leopards and hyenas outside of protected areas, there's no data that I could find. And I'm not too sure why that is, why it's an undersampled area. I know the Blighter River Nature Reserve is quite a tough place to access, so that might be limiting research in that area. But I was very surprised to find that there's a lack of published wildlife data, especially outside of Kruger and its greater Kruger landscape. And then in terms of the linear infrastructure, it is a work that Ingwe Research Program Marine are focusing a lot on the R40 this year with their road ecology project. And they are barriers. We know that there's been a number of road kills of leopards last year on the railway line as well as on the road. And there's clearly movement across that. Early results from Ingwe's work now using culverts under the R40. There's animals moving through there all the time, especially under the road. So it's going to be interesting to to see the results from that work. But my work is going to be mostly focusing on the different land use types and how they are influencing the movement of these species through the landscape, because connectivity is a big question these days, and linking landscapes and this idea of functional connectivity so the populations aren't isolated and require less management from us. How can agriculture, which is only becoming more prevalent in landscapes, contribute to the movement of wildlife if there's tolerance from landowners on those areas? But I think together with Ingwe, there's going to be a lot of findings in the next few years that's going to really inform this corridor, or this idea of a corridor between the Kruger and the Blighter. I hope that answers your question. If anybody has an answer to why there's no published literature on densities, I'd be very interested to chat to you.
Any more questions for these gentlemen? Nick, you need to ask Simon a question. Give it if Nick can ask a question.
Simon, so I mean, the interesting side of the story for me is obviously the alien plants and how. So, what do you think the implications are of clearing and potential for other sites being found? And alien plants are obviously increasing and do threaten various plant diversity. So what do you think the implications are of alien plants in the broader Blader catchment?
I think it's a very vulnerable landscape because it's had decades of the timber industry transforming it. And I think there are potentially undescribed species that we could lose if work isn't done to protect these grassland ecosystems on top of the canyon. There's still a lot of biodiversity up there. There's a lot of complexity that we still don't fully grasp. And if we don't act now to get in there and look after it, it's going to be gone, and we miss that opportunity to get a full grasp of the biodiversity that's out there. Yes, Rami?
Sorry, just a follow-up question linked to that. The thorn-croftia, do we know? Thank you. The thorn-croftia, do we know how it's, like, do we know how it pollinates and how it distributes? Does it rely on, how do the seeds spread? Do we know any of that kind of information?
There is a very specialized fly that, with a long proboscis that pollinates it. And I think not all of the species of that fly have been properly studied. It's been recorded around Barberton, where you got 3 different species of thorn-croftia. So it's been captured pollinating them there. There's probably a fly that you'll find in Blader. I don't know if there's a known species for it. And then they aren't very effective at seed dispersal. It will basically be down to wind and shaking that calyx and knocking the seeds out of the little pocket that they form in. So there's no known animal or other vector that transports the seed.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, gentlemen. You did a great job. And over to Ant.
Thanks, MT. Okay, so we are finished with our presentations, and we've got tea and discussions, and then we just come back for a final wrap-up. So we're going to be dividing you into random groups. So as you walk out the door, Dumisa is going to give you one of these tickets, which has 1 to 6 written on it. And that designates the group that you have been placed in. And I've made a list here. So, number 1, group 1 is with Wayne here in the hall. So that's group 1. Group 2 is with Romy in Hongoi. So if you just walk down the boardwalk here, it's the first room after the tea. Then Shizidzi is going to be hosted by Louise, who has agreed to help us out. That's just after Hongoi. Then if you go around the corner, there's tables where some of you would have had lunch outside. So I'll be there, group 4. Tony's going to be with group 5 in the dining hall. And then group 6 gets to sit on the couches in the lounge, all the way just on the other side of the bar by the TV. With Maritenka. So those are the 6 groups. The leaders of those groups, you're welcome. The weather was looking a bit chilly, but if your group wants to go and find a spot somewhere else, you are welcome to lead your group to a more pretty spot if you want, if you're happy that the weather is not too cold. So we've done quite well for time. I think let's give 30 minutes. 30 minutes to have your tea, chat, and then go and find your group. So that'll be at 20 to 3. You go find your group. Good? Yeah. Sweet.